Okay, so I want to start off by saying me and Dr. Christian are going to see if there's a way that I can add my PowerPoint along with this video to the discussion board because that's what I'm going to be following as I talk. So I'm doing my presentation over the Top Girls Act 1 by Carol Churchill. I wanted to start off with some of her background information. She was born in 1938 on September 3rd in London, England. She was a British playwright whose works normally dealt with feminist issues, the abuses of power, and sexual politics. When she was 10, her family immigrated to Montreal, Canada, and it wasn't until 1957 that she actually moved back home to England for her college studies. And she graduated in 1960 from Lady Margaret Hall, which is through Oxford University. It comes to no surprise, she graduated with her bachelor's in English literature. And one thing I actually found really interesting about her was that while she was in college, she actually wrote plays that were performed by the student drama groups at the college. So through the plays that she wrote while she was in college was Downstairs, which was written in 1958, You've No Need to Be Frightened, and Having a Wonderful Time, which were both written in 1960. In 1982, her play Top Girls became a notable play within her career, which gained her immense appreciation from the critics. The play focuses on the struggle and sacrifices of a woman within a male-dominated society. In 1981, she actually won the prestigious Obie Award for playwriting consecutively for her play Cloud Nine, and in 1982, she won the award once again for her play Top Girls. So, on to the characters within this act. We have Marlene, Isabella Bird, Lady Nijo, Dulgret, Pope Joan, Patient Griselda, Janine, Joyce, Angie, and Kit. Marlene is a protagonist within the play, and she holds a strong part throughout the play. Next is Isabella, and she's known as a real-life 19th century English explorer, writer, and naturalist. Lady Nijo is a real-life 13th century concubine who turned Buddhist and then eventually went and to be a nun. Dulgret is a subject of the Dulgriet, a Flemish Renaissance painting by Peter Bruegel the Elder. According to a legend, Pope Joan disguised herself as a man within the Middle Ages and reigned as Pope for 2 years until her true identity was discovered, which we see throughout the first scene in Act 1. Patient Griselda is a figure from European folklores and most famously featured in the tales of Boccaccio and Chaucer. Janine is a young woman who comes to the Top Girls employment agency with an interview with Marlene to get a higher paying salary. And Angie is Joyce's 16-year-old daughter. And Angie's a little weird, as you can see. She only has one friend, and she's 12 years old, which is her neighbor Kit. And Joyce is Marlene's sister. So, in the first scene of the act, Marlene begins waiting for 6 of her friends where they're getting ready to celebrate her promotion as a high-ranking official at the Top Girls Employment Agency within London. The ladies go through several different conversations. They go through religion, marriages, musical and literature backgrounds, perspectives on death, different lifestyle choices, and then the conversation turns towards Pope Joan and how she dresses the man in order to study within Athens. That conversation tends to lead up to the conversation of children, and they go through the discussion about their children's deaths, their children being taken away from them leaving their children, anything, that matters. So by the end of the dinner, the women begin to fall apart and break down. They are all drunk at this time, and you begin to see a vulnerable side of them, and they show, affection to all their pains and losses to one another. To me, it seems like something that they can't show whenever men are around. So the second scene begins with Marlene meeting Janine, and Janine is coming in because she believes that she's an underpaid secretary and she wants a higher pay. So her reasoning behind, upping her pay at this point is she's getting married and she needs to save up for her wedding, which Marlene does not agree with. She tries to convince Janine that she needs to keep her marriage under wraps in order for her social standing to remain appropriate for the corporate world. Marlene wants Janine to understand that her reputation can be greatly impacted due to the fact that she is going to become a wife and a mother eventually, And so the conversation just goes towards Marlene basically telling Janine about the sacrifices a woman has to make in order to be known as a productive woman and succeed within the corporate world. And then the third scene goes to me, it's showing a relationship between Angie and Kit and Joyce and Marlene. So Angie and Kit have a resilient friendship with one another, and they would rather challenge one another instead of do, friendly things as kids. So the scene actually portrays Churchill's idea of feminism within the early 1980s, which is where a woman would rather tear you down than bring you up. And so Angie believes that she has superpowers, and she wants to scare Kit with them. And she states that at one point she wants Joyce dead. So one of the most disturbing parts, but it's also a key part within this scene to me, is whenever Angie actually licks Kit's menstrual blood off of her fingers. To me, Angie does this to show her dominance over Kit and, her powers over her. As the scene goes on, you start to see that Joyce can't control Angie, and she's just completely unruly to all of her demands. So although Joyce can't control Angie, she believes that Marlene's daughter is also of a ridiculous nature as well. The scene ends up with the idea that mothers react through their love and devotions to their children despite them being troubled listeners with them. It just shows the relationships between, the four different girls. So now I want to speak about feminism, since to me this play is a feminist play. And so in the 1960s, women were actually very limited to their everyday lives. Their jobs were revolved around, house care items, being a mother, catering to her husband. They were viewed as objects more than people. And so the goal for feminism was to gain equality of men and women politically, socially, and economically. It was also to help provide women with a voice in society and within the government. One form of feminism, which I talk about in my discussion question, is radical feminism, which is where the views of patriarchy are dividing societal rights, privileges, and power primarily along the lines of sex, and as a result, it oppresses women and it privileges the men. So now to my discussion questions. The first question I have is, some people can consider this play as a radical feminist play or an anti-feminist play. Which one do you believe this play falls under, and why? In my opinion, it's more of a radical feminist play, as you can see through Marlene. Marlene chooses to leave her child and her husband behind in order to gain social structure within her corporate world. To me, she couldn't do this as a mother, and she couldn't do this as a wife. So that shows Marlene's struggle as a woman within this society. I don't really see how it can't not be feminism, other than through how strong her characters are as women. So the second question is, in this case where Marlene chooses to leave her family and daughter, do you believe this was strong choice for a woman during this period, or a weak choice for this woman as a period? To me, I think that it can be both. I'm leaning more towards a strong, because a woman has to choose to leave not only her husband, but her kids behind in order to gain a social status within her job and the society. So I couldn't imagine in these times me choosing to leave my family so that I can gain, higher standing within the corporate world. I see it as a strong side of her because she chooses to do this, but I also see it as a weak side because she is a mother, she is, a wife, she did make obligations, and, she had all these things to do, and she would rather, leave her family behind than stay, as a woman figure. So I guess it could go both ways. It's really your outlook on the play as a whole. The third question is, at the beginning of the play, the 6 women are discussing their life choices. Do you believe the ending of the scene shows their vulnerability as women? And how do you feel about Marlene's reaction to the portion of this play? I do think that it shows their vulnerability as women, because when you're around a male, a woman has to stay strong. She has to stay her best self. And at this point in the play, it's the very beginning. They're not around any men. It's just 6 women, surrounded with each other. And so they all drink and have all these conversations that are very detailed with one another. And you can tell that Marlene tries to leave each conversation. So she tries to leave the conversation to death, try to leave the conversation to religion. So at this portion of the play, I think Marlene's more focused on herself rather than the other women. They are vulnerable to one another. I mean, they do begin to cry about their losses and, you know, the things that's happened with their children and how they had to grow up and stuff like that. So I believe the ending of the play does show their vulnerability, and I don't really agree with Marlene's reaction to it. But then again, Churchill did seem to make Marlene a strong-willed character within this story, so I can see why she reacts the way she does within that scene as the play goes on. The last question is, Marlene is too strong-willed as a woman during this time, or do you believe that Churchill gave her strong characteristics to show the struggle of women throughout the patriarchal society? So back to what I just said, I think that Churchill intentionally gave her strong characteristics as a woman to show the struggle that women had to go through. A woman couldn't just be a wife and a mother. She had to be, you know, just a woman. She had to gain her social standing without anyone holding her back. And men within this society did view, you know, her being a wife and her having children as holding her back. They didn't think that she could handle her job as a wife and mother and handle her job, you know, within the corporate world. So I think that Churchill intentionally gave her strong characteristics in order for her to show the strong side through the patriarchal society and the things that women had to do, you know, to survive this society. They couldn't just be themselves. They couldn't be, you know, 3 in 1. They either had to be a hardworking woman or a mother and wife. They didn't get to choose, and that shows through Marlene's decision to leave her family and her child behind.